Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Nicole Martin, and I'm going to be moderating this session for us this morning. So Sarah Jenevein is going to be presenting on us for us this morning, and I'll just turn it over to you, Sarah.
Thank you.
You should be able to share your screen and everything.
Okay, I'm writing out some questions in the chat I'm going to post, and then you can kind of do your introductions over in the chat. So let me just finish posting those now. Okay, so the questions I had were, in addition to your name, which you've already posted for Nicole, could you just add what you teach? And 2, how familiar you are with micro-credentials, if you've done any previously, anything that you might know about them or think about them. And then 3rd, most importantly, what do you hope to get out of this session this morning? So I'll just wait for people to answer those 3 questions. And it looks like we have 17 people, including hosts, so fewer than that. I'm having trouble having both screens open. So Nicole, if you wouldn't mind moderating the chat for me throughout this, I am not going to be able to look at that while I'm presenting, it seems like. Usually it'll let me minimize my screen while keeping it in presenter mode, but it looks like it won't do that today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, just looking through the chat here a little bit. So we've got a nice kind of mix of different backgrounds and formal, informal education. Like to learn more about what micro-credentials are or understand them to a deeper degree. Okay. All right, this gives me a really good idea of where everybody's coming from. So thank you to everybody who posted in the chat. If there's anyone who's just joining us, if you could answer 3 questions in the chat, your name and what you teach. 2nd, how familiar you are with micro-credentials. And 3rd, what you would like to gain out of this session. Cool, and Marie has just posted those questions again for everybody. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm gonna dive in at this point. Feel free to post questions in the chat, and Nicole will be fielding those throughout the presentation. If anything comes up, Nicole, that you want to interject, go ahead and just interrupt me, that's fine. And then we can also have time for more questions at the end. So I will start with just a brief introduction of who I am and who my organization is, and then we'll go more into the micro-credentials. But thank you everybody for joining me at 8:30 this morning. This is pretty early for a Monday, so I appreciate it. All right, so with that, a little background about my organization, UTeach Computer Science. So we are part of the University of Texas at Austin, as you can see from that picture of the tower. The UTeach Institute, which is our parent organization, is a nationally replicated pre-service teacher prep program for undergraduates who are majoring in STEM and want to go on to teach STEM in secondary school. So that was developed by faculty experts and experienced STEM educators back in the 90s. I think 1996 was when that program started. It has since been replicated at over 45 universities and colleges across the United States. And that model is being used in a wide variety of contexts to prepare undergraduates to go into STEM teaching with this focus on inquiry-based instruction. So my organization didn't come along until the National Science Foundation had an initiative specifically around computer science, broadening participation in computer science. And with that funding at the national level, there were some researchers, education professors, expert master teachers who helped develop this program, UTeach Computer Science, that is a curriculum provider and professional development provider for in-service teachers at the high school level. We have ongoing support as well as curriculum materials and workshops for teachers of AP Computer Science Principles and AP Computer Science A So these are high school AP level courses that if students pass the AP exam, they end up earning credit toward college. But also, computer science principles was a new course developed in 2016 that really, the design of the course is around broadening participation, like I said, and also just, providing this strong foundation in all aspects of computer science, not just about programming. So if you're interested in our curriculum, you're welcome to reach out to us. But our sort of design thinking behind the curriculum, which we're now applying to micro-credentials, are really based on these three parts of our approach. The first is project-based instruction. So this encourages problem solving, critical thinking, and collaboration. We've really tried to apply this to developing micro-credentials that are oriented towards solving specific problems in the classroom and actually having teachers put their learning to practice immediately. I'll get back to that in a little bit. The second one is providing personally meaningful activities that motivate all students to pursue computer science. So this is a thread running throughout our micro-credentials that we want to make sure teachers are thinking, they're being thoughtful about how to engage all students and how to rely on design within their curriculum, their activities, to really broaden participation specifically for computer science, but these can be applied to any STEM area. And lastly, we have a really robust teacher support program. So we assure that teachers have the content knowledge and the pedagogical strategies to help students succeed. The micro-credential work really grows out of this. So the micro-credentials that we've been developing are really based around pedagogy of teaching computer science. Our curriculum, right here, just the two courses that I mentioned. If you are interested in teaching AP computer science, we have these two amazing curricula, but I think most people here are not at this, not teaching at this level. And there are ways that we can help you integrate computing or computer science into any subject and any grade level. So we'll focus on those today. Our curriculum licenses for UTeach Computer Science include the teacher materials, which are comprehensive, teacher-tested lesson plans that have been endorsed by the College Board. We also offer unlimited student materials. That's an online textbook with all of the materials that students need for the course. And lastly, our ongoing teacher support is through a variety of means: one-on-one coaching, webinars, which are open to the public, so please feel free to join us if you want to learn more about our program. And then lastly, our online professional learning community. And the link on the side there will take you to request sample lessons if this is something you're interested in. All right, so going more into our micro-credentialing work, the micro-credentials that I'm going to show you today are funded by the U.S. Department of Education. We had a SEED grant, which stands for Supporting Effective Educator Development, and that is in support of the goals listed here. So first, expanding UTeach secondary STEM teacher preparation pathways, which is what I was talking about earlier with the programs that are nationally replicated among many different colleges and universities. Second, increasing the number of computer science teachers in high needs schools. So the SEED grant is funding over 150 teachers to participate in professional development with us, to get our curriculum for 2 years for free. And this is just an amazing grant opportunity. We're so excited to be sharing with teachers. And we have our first cohort going through right now through the summer, through our professional development, that is starting these computer science teaching pathways and building those funds of knowledge in schools all over the United States. And then lastly, studying the role that the CS curriculum and teacher support play in strengthening CS education over the next 3 years. So this is more of a long-term process that we're working through. The study with the 150 teachers is part of that. And we also are developing these micro-credentials to help strengthen CS education. So with the funding from the SEED grant, we have developed a series of micro-credentials. There are going to be 8 in total, but right now we have fewer than that, which I will show you at the end, and more coming. But before I get into that, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about micro-credentials. This is a really great video. I'm going to try and play it, but I need to switch my audio. Let's see. Microphone. Okay. Let's see if this works.
Ever wonder how you can be recognized for professional learning throughout your career? Micro-credentials recognize the skills you've developed to drive learning in and out of your classroom. This lets you personalize your learning based on interests, your students' needs, and school and district goals. By shifting how learning is recognized, from seat time to demonstrated competence, micro-credentials make the growing wealth of resources you use, from virtual communities and online tools to coaches and mentors, more relevant and meaningful. You can select a single micro-credential or a stack, collect the required evidence, and submit it online for assessment. If successful, you will earn the micro-credential and get a shareable digital badge to enhance your profile, resume, and validate your unique skills. To see what this can mean for you and your school, explore the Micro-Credential platform today.
All right, so that was a little bit of a background video on micro-credentials. In the chat, can you just tell me whether you were able to hear that well? If not, I can share the link to it. Okay, yeah, everybody could hear it, great, okay. All right, one second. Just struggling with some other family members coming in the background. This is the Zoom life over here. All right, so let's see. So back to micro-credentials. The video that you just watched was from Digital Promise, which is our partner in developing micro-credentials. We've been working with them since last October, and they are widely regarded as one of the foremost micro-credentialing organizations in the world. So they have been helping us to kind of develop micro-credentials based on our background, our practical knowledge, and then, you know, fit those into these kind of principles that they've developed. So the first one is the micro-credentials are competency-based. So unlike other forms of professional education that might be more knowledge-based, where you learn something, you take a test, then you've quote passed, and you know, you have this knowledge, but these are more embedded in actually performing some action, doing something to show that you actually have achieved mastery, rather than just a knowledge-based competency, knowledge-based performance, that you have to actually do something to show that you have competence. Second, we have they are job embedded, which means that micro-credentials are related to the actual performance of your job as a teacher, and you are earning them through performing actions in the classroom or virtual classroom, whatever it may be, with your students. And so not just going off to some workshop somewhere else, learning something and then bringing it back, but actually performing the actions in your personal context to earn the credit for this. Thirdly, they are personalized. So this is just part of the structure of micro-credentials, is that you can pick and choose which ones you want to actually pursue and match those to the skills that you currently have that you want to grow, or that the areas where you feel like you don't have as much background or knowledge, and then you want to get some help in those areas. They are on demand. So Digital Promise is available at all times. You can go whenever you want to start a micro-credential. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. So it's up to you when you do them. There's no specific time you have to show up from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and actually sit down in person. You can do them on your own schedule. And then lastly, they are shareable. So this is an area of micro-credentialing that is still being explored, is sort of how to share these how to make them recognizable, standardized, things like that. So on that point, there are some future directions, I think, with micro-credentials. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview of kind of where they are right now. Those are the benefits. Some future directions might include things like licensure and relicensure. There are many people right now who are pursuing the question of how micro-credentials can be used to expand pathways into teaching. And we are specifically thinking about this in terms of computer science education, but this is something that across the board, many people involved in micro-credentials are currently working on. So given that they are bite-sized chunks, they're not huge programs, they can be easier to kind of mix and match and then build capacity over time in areas that are really highly focused on the competency that you want to perform. So this may offer an interesting and fruitful way to expand teaching pathways. Secondarily, continuing education units. So this is kind of how we're using them today. This morning, you're going to be working on a micro-credential in just a bit and starting that so you can both earn education units here. But if you complete the micro-credential that we start on, you could also earn continuing education units depending on if your district actually recognizes finishing a micro-credential as an equivalent to a certain number of CEU hours. So that is really done at a local level right now, but people are thinking about how we could change the face of professional learning programs to replace those traditional requirements of hourly, in the seat continuing education to something that's more asynchronous and self-paced. And lastly, compensation, employment, and reputation. So the big question here is, how can we standardize micro-credentials for salary incentives, hiring decisions, and also building a school or district's brand? So I think people are thinking about this right now. There are a few pilot districts across the United States working with Digital Promise to actually use micro-credentials in hiring and in incentivizing teachers to by offering salary incentives. So with that, a little more about Digital Promise. So this company has been building this ecosystem of micro-credentials since 2014. There are over 450 competency-based micro-credentials, also known as badges. So the badge is the thing that you earn at the end, and then that represents the micro-credential. The actual doing of the work is that competency-based micro-credential. And those are on a wide range of research-backed skills. These micro-credentials are developed, assessed, and awarded by more than 50 partner organizations, including us, UTeach Computer Science, ranging from institutes of higher education to nonprofit organizations. So the link down there is where we'll go in just a minute. I'll reshare that in the chat once we get to that point. But then also you can go there and just explore on your own. They have just so many different badges, really wide ranging. I love going to look and see what other people are developing because they're really coming from all over the place, thinking about different aspects of teaching and learning. So they're mostly for educators, but I think there are even some for students. So Digital Promise, micro-credentials. The micro-credentials aren't the only thing they do, but they've really kind of specialized in this area. And they've been great partners with us through the seed grant to help us develop our own micro-credentials and then host them on the site. So the process of getting a micro-credential, through Digital Promise at least, goes through the following steps. So first, you would just select the skill that you've developed already or that you'd like to develop, and find a micro-credential that really targets that skill. And you would read the micro-credential and start on it. Then you actually have to go through the process of collecting required evidence that demonstrates your competence in that selected area. There may be a wide variety of different pieces of evidence depending on the micro-credential that you're doing. So it might be an educator reflection where you answer a few guiding questions about how are you thinking about this? How did you plan out this activity? What evidence will you collect? That might also be video So some of the micro-credentials, including ours, require video evidence within the classroom showing that you have mastered this area, and also, kind of showing it in action. So we get a sense, not just through the words, but actually through the actions of the students, what's happening in the classroom. Obviously, the evidence should be collected based on and in accordance with your district or school's policies. So if there are going to be images of students, you would need to have permission to do that through your district or your school. Thirdly, you would upload and submit that collected evidence to be assessed by the badge issuer. So the badge issuer in this case would be us, but if you used a different micro-credential from Digital Promise, then the issuer could be the organization that's posted that micro-credential. So after the evidence is submitted, goes through a review process. We have someone on our team that reviews all micro-credential applications, and then we'll either say that you were awarded it or that you are not yet awarded it, and then you can go back and actually revise the areas of the micro-credential that weren't up to the standard listed. So it's not even a one and done thing. It can be an iterative process as well. And then lastly, you would download, upon earning this badge, download the digital version of the badge, and you can share it directly via social media or email, which is just nice as a way to kind of show off your learning and to start a conversation with other educators. Like I spent, 12 hours, 5 hours, whatever it is, working on this micro-credential. What do you think? And it's just a great way to open up lanes of conversation around different topics for pedagogical strategies or whatever you're working on. All right, so with that, going to our actual micro-credentials from UTeach Computer Science. And the remaining amount of time, well, I'll answer some questions and we'll kind of dive into micro-credentialing. So these are currently our 4 live micro-credentials. They're mostly around computer science, obviously, because that is what we specialize in. But the one that we'll be looking at today is the last one, peer instruction. And that really goes for any level, any subject. So first, pair programming. This is where 2 students work together to solve a programming problem, taking on different roles. So one student is the navigator, and they kind of direct and troubleshoot, and the other is the driver, and they are actually the one working on the keyboard. So this is a research-based strategy in computer science that has been shown to increase learning, retention, and just collaboration among students. So that's a really widely used strategy from kindergarten all the way through professional levels. Live coding is where the teacher actually solves a programming problem by coding in real time, so programming a problem in front of students. And there's sort of this basis of making the metacognition that's happening, like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't imagine that I was going to get that error. What does that error mean? So the teacher talks through their own thought processes in front of the students and really demonstrates these habits of mind of programming, including, debugging is a big part of that. So finding the error, interpreting the error, going and fixing the error, and ask the students to stop and predict throughout. So it's a much more active form of demonstration, also has been shown through a lot of research to be very effective in building knowledge and also metacognition for students. Rubber duck debugging is a great name. This comes from a story about a programmer who, I think it was, he wrote a textbook, but he had a friend who would carry around a rubber duck and just talk to it, because after, realizing sometimes when you have a problem, seems intractable, and you have just gone around and around in circles yourself, you go to a friend and you say, I've got this horrible problem, I can't figure it out. And you start trying to explain the problem to your friend. And just in the act of explaining, you realize the solution. So it's almost like you don't need anybody real to talk to. You could just as well have talked to a rubber duck. So that's where the term comes from. But that's also widely used among K-12 students, as well as in professional context. So if you go to a computer software development office, you might see rubber ducks on top of people's computers. So it's kind of a culture as well as an activity for teachers to try with their students and really to develop some of those debugging skills. And lastly, with peer instruction, and this has actually come from physics. It didn't start as a strategy in computer science, but it is where you have a very structured way of asking a multiple choice question and then encouraging students to discuss the answer with one another and then re-answer the same question to hopefully have students teach each other. That's why it's peer instruction, as opposed to the teacher teaching the content. So we have more micro-credentials coming out soon. We have 4 more in the works that'll also be free as a result of the funding from the US Department of Education for the SEED study that we're doing. So if you want to follow us on social media, you can always hear announcements about our upcoming micro-credentials there. And I will go further now into peer instruction. So if you go to this link, bit.ly/CS-microcredentials. It is case sensitive. You can actually find our set of microcredentials, and we're going to go further into peer instruction. So choose that one once you get to that page, and then we will read the first few sections on our own and then kind of come back together. But at this point, I'm going to just go over and look at the chat to see if there's any questions. Feel free to post questions in the chat if you are having issues, or just like come on Zoom, unmute yourself. It's totally fine. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody. All right, so for the remaining time that we have together, it's 9 o'clock and we've got 30 more minutes. So it should be plenty of time to really get started on this micro-credential. And like I said, if you do actually have time to finish this and put it into practice in your classroom, whether virtual or in person, you can earn the actual credit for the micro-credential in addition to getting the credit through this, the hour that we're spending together for this PD. You can also go on to do other micro-credentials, so I'm not going to limit you to just doing this one. If you do want to pursue other micro-credentials with us or with another partner on Digital Promise, totally encourage you to do that. It's just an amazing set of different, really widely ranging competencies. And so if you are planning to introduce computer science, either integrated into your classroom or as a standalone class, if you are an actual dedicated CS teacher, I would recommend starting with our micro-credentials and then going to some other ones as well. Okay, so we'll go to the peer instruction micro-credential, and I'm just gonna click out of here, and then we're just gonna read that ourselves. I will give you a little bit of an introduction. So this, as you can see, is instructional strategies for computer science. We have 3 micro-credentials in this stack is what it's called. And so when you see the symbol, it just means a stack of micro-credentials. And then we also have the stack we're currently working on computer programming and debugging. So this would be really for teachers who are using programming in the classroom, whereas these are a little bit more wide-ranging. So peer instruction, here we go. So the idea behind this is the educators implementing peer instruction as an active learning strategy to support students' mastery of content knowledge and the ability to explain and justify their ideas. Through peer instruction, the educator provides students with the opportunity to teach and learn from each other, as opposed to the teacher teaching everyone. All right, so I'll let you spend a couple minutes reading through these sections. The breakdown here is just identifying the key methods supporting peer instruction, then kind of breaking down the method components and the steps to implementing peer instruction. This is the meat of this section, these 5 steps. And then also best practices for implementing peer instruction. So what to do, what not to do. Then we get into formulating effective questions. So I want you to stop at this section right here, but I'll just give you a few minutes to read through at your own pace up until that section. If you have any questions, again, feel free to post them in the chat or to just speak them out loud. All right. So the idea behind this micro-credential is really to have educators be able to do this on their own. So really everything you need to know is in the micro-credential as written on Digital Promise. But today, since we're working together, I think it'd be great if we could just talk through this ourselves in a group and kind of tailor the micro-credential to this different format. So with that, what questions do you have about peer instruction at this point? Or if you already are very familiar, I'd love to hear how you've used peer instruction in the past. Nicole, I wonder if it might be better to just do breakout rooms. Do we have that option in this Zoomer?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, cool. So how about we put everybody in breakout rooms in groups of 3, and then you can talk amongst yourselves about what your prior experiences, if any, with using peer instruction, and also what your takeaways are from what you just read. All right, we have people rejoining. Looks like, hello, welcome back. We may have lost some people in transition. Hopefully not too many. All right, so I'm gonna call on some people to share from what they were talking about in their breakout rooms. So Julie, I see you on video and I don't mean to call you out, but I would love to hear if you don't mind sharing what were some of the takeaways in your room.
Well, what Marie and I talked about mainly was how, since I don't work in a classroom, how I might be able to utilize this in a non-formal education setting. And I work at a botanical garden.
Yeah.
So when well, at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. So whenever I actually get students back in there, we were thinking that I could come up with a specific question and that is a little challenging, and I would know the right answer, have that answer in the multiple choice, and then have my small groups that I already have normally, break them up into smaller groups and let those small groups talk and discuss about the question and figure things out.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. And too, like if you're out in the Wildflower Center and you don't have a way to really easily show that multiple choice question and to collect students' responses, you could do something as simple as like a true false or A or B kind of question.
Yeah.
And then students could show you their answers through some sort of hand symbol, raised hand, hands, thumbs up, thumbs down for true, false, something like that. And you can have them just in real time kind of do a prediction, talk with each other, and then report back after that. So it would be a little bit of a modified version of this method, but would still probably work in that context, even if you don't have a screen or clickers or anything like that.
Right.
That's great. Pam was in my little breakout room. Pam, do you want to share what you were talking about with Think, Pair, Share? I really liked that, how you associated the two of them, what you were thinking.
Well, yeah, that's, it immediately made me think of Think, Pair, Share, which I think it was more lower elementary, and where you give the kids a topic and they turn to their neighbor, they think about themselves and they share with their neighbor and then they share with the group. But I thought this is really I immediately thought about how this could have been used in college. Even though I went to a small one, we still had a few bigger classes, and it gives, when you have a big class, it gives all those students an opportunity to have their voices heard. So, and you can hear different, in it, hopefully a nice, safe environment, all the different opinions. And even though I teach in a small school and have small classes, we still need that because some people don't speak up. So their opinions can be heard with this. So it allows students to be able to express their thoughts, build on their own knowledge, and then as a group, even enhance that and give them food for thought, even if they don't respond. But it really is a way of in making kids part of the whole classroom environment, I think. And then that's important. And that's really important where we are, because we're an experiential experiential phenomenon-based school. So we have a lot of discussions, but there are always some kids that are very, for whatever reason, closed mouth. So this gives them a nice little opportunity, because even if they don't speak, their partner speaks.
Yeah, and you can have it be really low stakes too. So one of the best practices was don't grade students' answers.
Right.
So then they're not worried like, oh, can I just get the right answer? Students are going to just try and, get the answer without actually engaging in the thought process behind it. And then the discussion, becomes more salient when you're using this as a formative assessment rather than summative. Pam and I were talking about, like, I first came into contact with this teaching strategy in college in a really large introductory biology class. That's sort of where it comes from, but I found it to be very successful even in smaller classes, just because, like Pam was saying, it does kind of formalize and give structure to the idea sharing between students, and it gives a context in which students are kind of struggling productively with one another. Like, can you convince your partner why you're right and they're wrong? It's a different kind of question than just what's the right answer, or why did you choose that answer? So definitely kind of sets a fertile ground, and then students can run with it as much as they want. Of course, you may have some students who don't really participate or just say, I don't know. And I think it just takes a lot of repetition, a lot of making them feel safe for when they get the answer wrong, and then just encouraging more discussion among students, small groups. All right, so with that, let me go share my screen again. So we have, I think the most challenging thing of doing peer instruction is really in developing a good peer instruction question. So I worked on this with a researcher who has been studying peer instruction for many years. So you can open this question template straight from that micro-credential. It's under the resources at the very bottom part of the resources section, and then make a copy of this. If you just go to File and then make a copy into your own Google Drive, or you can download it and work on it from your computer. So basically just asking you some sort of contextualizing information at the top. What grade level, which course or subject are you writing this question for? What's the targeted concept or skill that you want students to learn through that question? And it really should be more than just simple factual recall. Peer instruction questions are not going to be very powerful for things like vocabulary definitions. So if you're quizzing students just on, what is the definition of osmosis, right, in a biology class, that's not going to make for a really fruitful peer instruction question. You might want to create a question where osmosis is the targeted concept, but you're asking a question about something that's predictive or explanatory about why would this happen? Look at this evidence. What do you think happened? And then also, what prior knowledge do students need to have before answering this question? Obviously, they don't need to know the answer, because why are you asking if they already completely know everything? But they need to have some sort of foundational knowledge, usually, to just understand the terms of the question. And then the rest of the template is really about writing that question. So including your question under peer instruction question. If you're using a pre-existing resource, and there are quite a few of those, which I have linked in the micro-credential for different subjects, different areas, you just credit the source there and you can use that question there. And then filling out the answer choices. You do not have to use all of these. So like with Julie, I said, like, you could do a true false question, A and B, does not have to be all 4 answers. But then you would say, answer A is either correct or incorrect, and then give example student reasoning. I find this to be the most fruitful part of writing questions myself when I do write peer instruction questions, is thinking about what are the assumptions that students would be operating under if they chose this question. So trying to get at, like, misconceptions or misunderstandings or naive ideas that students might bring, and how that might lead to different answers being selected. So
are these documents that you're showing, are those available to us to use?
Yes, yes, they are linked from the bottom of the.
I'm so sorry, I missed that part. I had to deal with a child.
No problem. So yeah, under resources on that micro-credential page, it is one of the last sections where it says question template. And then if you just click there, it'll open this file, which is a view only, you can make a copy into your own drive or download it.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you so much. I apologize for interrupting you.
No problem. I'm glad you asked rather than sitting there wondering. So yeah, so as soon as you have actually written the question, you can try it out with your students. You know, it doesn't have to be the perfect question. I think a lot of this, it comes back to iterative design. And I have a couple kind of guidelines here. So after you have tested this out with students to figure out and kind of learn from your own experience, looking at what results you get from asking that question, I think these 2 indicators that I list here are gonna tell you that you chose, that your answer choices were well formulated and the question was well formulated. So the first one is that each answer choice is chosen by at least a few students. If you have one answer choice that's not chosen by anybody, then maybe it isn't something that students are actually thinking. Like maybe you were, you thought that they were going to struggle on this one thing, but they didn't. And so that's a surprise. You could just take that answer choice out. The second indicator is that only 30 to 50% of students answer correctly on the first attempt. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but if you can get an answer, or if you can get a question to which many students are struggling, so fewer than half of your students are getting it right, that is actually an area of productive struggle. And then hopefully after discussing with one another, that number would jump from 30 to 50% to something more like 70 to 80%. And so, you know, looking for those indicators can be helpful. Also, as you review other people's questions, other resources that you might come across, you might ask yourself these questions here. So one, is this question challenging yet reachable for students? And 2, do the answer choices to the question represent actual answers that students would give? And that gets back to understanding the students' thinking going into answering the question, why they would choose that question. All right, so just to review kind of what we've talked about, we went over micro-credentials, what micro-credentials are, what the benefits of them might be, why you might want to pursue micro-credentials as another way of getting professional education. We talked about my group's work in developing a series of micro-credentials using our funding from the US Department of Education. And I showed you the 4 that we have currently. We're working on 4 more. And then we started on this peer instruction micro-credential. So at this point, you've gotten all of the sort of basics introduction to this micro-credential. I would encourage you, you know, like we don't have time to actually do it now because obviously you have to put it into practice in your teaching, whether that's remote, outdoors, in person, hybrid, whatever it is, and then collect that evidence. But I'd really encourage you to go back and finish this. It shouldn't take more than a few hours. There are a lot of readings here that are evident, the evidence behind it, the research behind it. You don't have to read all of these. Reading the abstracts can be really powerful. And then I have a bunch of best practices linked here, videos of people actually using peer instruction, examples of peer instruction questions, and some more classroom resources that are more on the technological side of things. So especially if you're going to be remote or virtual, you might want to look into some of the polling software here, which can be helpful. And then talk stems from the New York City Department of Ed. These can be helpful when leading that discussion to debrief at the end with students. And then at the very bottom, you'll find the actual submission and evaluation criteria. So it's broken down into parts. There's part 1, which is an overview, just a question prompt that you would answer. Part 2 are the actual examples from your teaching. And then part 3 is an educator reflection. Once you go and you submit these, we would review them and then award you credit based on the completeness and the detail in your answers and your evidence. And then you would earn this micro-credential badge. So hopefully that gives you what you need to get started, and I hope that you'll pursue this. But in the few remaining minutes, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. You can just hop on with your microphone.
I really like this idea. Thank you. Well, at first I thought it was all computer science and I wasn't really sure what that was. But I teach STEM kids and like a STEM program. So part of our program is like I teach world cultures, but then we also have like Brainiac block where we do like engineering projects, and then I teach a 3D printer block. So this would go really, really well. So
that's awesome. Yeah, you're so welcome. I'm glad to hear that it'll work in your context.
Yes.
I just wanted to say it makes me excited to see my kids in a couple of weeks, even though it's online. They don't start till the 31st, but I think I actually will discuss this whole thing with them about first of all, the concepts of getting this little certifications, but also that this variation, this elaboration of what some of them who may have experienced it if they did elementary school in public, the think, pair, share, and how we want them to think more and outside the box and use what they know, and they can be unconventional in their thinking. I mean, those who have had me know I'm unconventional in my thinking. I've known some of them since they were in 6th grade, and now they're hitting what you would call 11th grade. So I'm excited. This is very cool.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear it. And I think they'll really pick it up very quickly. I think you kind of touched on one thing that is a great point, is that you can even tell students, like, here's this thing that we're going to try. We're going to do a peer instruction question. Here's what I want you to get out of it. Here's the structure of it. And kind of just like even being explicit when you use a peer instruction question, like that this is what we're doing and here's what the goal of it is. I think that can be really helpful scaffolding for students to kind of pick that up and run with it. And then it's like, from then on out, every time you're like, okay, time for a peer instruction question, then it's something that they know and they recognize, and they're totally ready to start those steps that they're very familiar with. All right, I think it's 9:30. Nicole, I'm gonna guess that we need to switch over to the next session. Is that right?
Yeah, so the next sessions are actually going to start at 10. We have a 30-minute break between each of these session blocks. So if people have additional questions for Sarah, we can stay on and ask those. Otherwise, we will see you all at the second block of sessions at 10 a.m.
Great, and then I'll just throw up my contact info up here, which I forgot to do while we're talking. So if you want to stay in touch with my organization, feel free to email us, find our website, or follow us on social media. So I'll just leave that up for like another minute while people kind of hop off and go take their break before the next session. Thank you all so much for joining me early this Monday morning. It was great. Hoping that you can apply this and use these ideas in your classroom. And best of luck, for the upcoming semester with all of the challenges that we're all facing.